Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Carlton People. I'm here with David. David, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to be talking to you. The first question I like to always ask, it's the best icebreaker. Tell me your Carlton story, where it began, and how it all, where it's come from.
Well, funnily enough, my Carlton story began, I suppose, with my mother's birth because she was born in Carlton.
Yep.
And my father, his family all came from Richmond, which is where I live now.
Yeah.
And his family have been in Richmond since 1880s. And he barracked for Richmond, but he wasn't really into football, so by rights I should barrack for Richmond, but my mum brainwashed us at birth so that we're all Carlton.
What a great lady.
Yes, yeah.
And what was the first memory of a Carlton game, or
Yeah.
do you remember?
Yes, I do actually, and it's not one that I actually attended because as a kid we didn't go. But I do recall listening to the 1970 grand final, Carlton versus Collingwood, of course,
Yep.
on the radio with my family at home. And in those days, there was no TV telecast of the match, so it was just radio.
Well, so you'd sit around the radio
And listen to the radio.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just amazing because almost better in a way because you don't quite know what's going on. You have to rely so much on the voice of the radio presenter and just the delay in knowing whether or not the goal has been kicked and, of course, at the end, whether or not the siren had gone. It was just fantastic.
I mean, you probably need some imagination. It probably allows your imagination to fly as well. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So what's... I mean, obviously, you've seen a few different ages now of,
Yes, I have, yeah.
consuming footy, because there was black and white, and there was
That's
colour,
right,
and
yep.
now we've got
Yep.
ultra 4K HD.
Yes, yeah.
What's the experience like now?
Yeah, well, I guess I also remember colour TV coming in because I think that was 1972, or at least that's when my family got a colour TV.
Yeah.
And just watching the footy in colour, it was just amazing at how much clearer it was and how much easier it was to watch. But then, of course, that's nothing like actually being at the game, because at the game you can see where the ball's going and you can sort of understand the pattern of the play a little bit, whereas on TV, no matter how good the quality, you're still relying on where the cameraman is or camerawoman is facing the camera.
Yeah.
Mm.
I've watched Carlton games in some of the most random areas, just little takeaway shops with barely any internet in rural China. I've got friends who have watched Carlton games on their phone in the desert while they're in the army. To sort of to see where we've developed and where we've come from listening to the radio and the family gathering around it. I like that.
Yeah. I lived in Japan for a few years, and I watched one of the Carlton grand finals at the Australian Embassy in Tokyo.
Oh, right.
That was really good, and they served pies and.
Love that. Love that. Love that. So you're one of the lucky ones, which is what people would be calling you now from the new generation. Talk to me about the golden era, because I come from an era where, I was 4 years old when 95 happened, so I don't remember it.
Yeah.
And all I have is the stories about, you guys don't know about that premiership quarter.
Yes.
Talk to me about the golden eras and are we close to something like that again? What's happening?
Well, I remember, of course, we won 68, 70, 72, then 79. So for me, that was the golden era. And I guess it was even more golden for me because I was at school at that time. And, of course, the first question that comes to the lips of all your friends on a Monday morning was, who won and who didn't win. And you just get ragged if you didn't win. Yeah,
well.
So it was great.
Don't worry, I know all about getting ragged for going for Carlton.
Yeah, exactly. You've grown up with it now. Yeah. So that particular period was great, and particularly, as I said, because I was at school. But then, of course, from that time on until now, literally, apart from perhaps one premiership, we've had that time where we haven't won, and so it puts it all into perspective, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you remember the groundwork before the golden era happened? Do you remember them as being youngsters that were coming up, and do you see any relation to what's happening now with our youngsters?
You mean in terms of the development?
The development,
of the players?
yeah.
Look, I think it's just a completely different game. Now it's just completely professionalised.
Yep.
Not that that's a bad thing, but it is very different to what it was before. And even though in those days players were, of course, professional, and I think they were full-time too and paid a lot of money, but there was nowhere near the media around them at the time. There was just I remember basically what you did is the football matches were on, and then on the Saturday night, I think it was, they'd replay one of the matches.
Yep.
So you actually didn't get to see your team very often unless you went to the games.
Yep.
Because in those days they only showed, I think they only showed one or possibly two replays of matches. So and there were no live matches.
I mean, you'd have to wait for the newspaper to come out to check
that's
scores.
right. Yeah.
I just thought, it's amazing the difference in experience.
That's right.
And
how... I lived in France too, and when I lived in France, I used to run to get an international newspaper, and I had to really look for it on the Monday.
Yep.
And right down at the bottom of the page in the sports section, right down there'd be a little tiny paragraph with the Australian Football League scores, and that's how I'd find out if Carlton won.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now you've got, anyone can write about, talk about Carlton.
Exactly.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Talk to me a little bit about recent times. Any standout games or moments for you that you've really enjoyed?
Yeah, look, I think for me one of the great things is being able to watch players that you really, really like and you respect them too. And I suppose Cripps is one of those players. And in terms of one game, I wouldn't say one because he just produces every week, doesn't he? And he's just such a great player. And the way that he can get the ball and go through the pack and just break away from them, it's just fantastic to watch. Yeah.
He's got that innate ability to just draw the crowd with him when he does one of those special moments.
Yes,
I mean, obviously Eddie Betsy's back as well. I think he's got that same ability. We're hoping that this is going to be, the start of the next golden era.
Yes, we are.
Most of us believe this is it, but so we should.
Yes. Yeah.
Talk to me about Carlton Pride.
Yep.
Now, this is something that you founded and a great initiative, and I want to know everything.
Well, I guess it came from the fact that firstly, I was telling you before we did this interview that I used to go to the footy when I was younger, from about age 15 onwards, I think, and I went for about 20 years.
Yep.
But it got to a point where I just felt I just couldn't go anymore because I was just so sick of hearing homophobic abuse at the footy, mainly directed at the players.
Yeah.
But it became very personal because every time I heard someone saying something like that, I felt like I wanted to stand up and say, "You're talking about me."
Yep.
But it was different, of course, in those days because it's much more accepted nowadays. But in those days, if you had said that, well, you were likely to get bashed.
Wow.
So you couldn't stand up and say that, or at least I wasn't brave enough to.
Yeah.
So I made a decision to stop going to the football, and I stopped going for 20 years.
Wow.
And I only went back to football about 6 years ago.
Yep.
And
was that profound? Well,
yeah,
I mean,
it was.
I wouldn't know. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Because at the time you're probably thinking, well, what if you knew about me? Would you say the same thing about me?
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you don't realise that when you're screaming out.
No. That's right.
Yeah.
And I guess when I decided to go back, I actually had never met, funnily enough, another gay person who liked football, and I had never met certainly another gay person who barracked for Carlton.
Yeah.
So I actually thought there weren't any.
You're the only
people.
one.
Yeah, but I was the only one.
Yeah.
And but anyway, I decided to see if I could start an LGBTI supporter group.
Yeah.
So I contacted Carlton, and I had a meeting with a lady there called Emily. I don't think she's there now.
Shout out to you, Emily.
Yes, yeah. And so I guess we went away from that meeting she probably thought, well, I'll see what he does. Anyway, the following year, which was 2017, another couple of people, Dennis and Ben, came along.
Yep.
And the three of us decided to just sort of set it up. And since then, Dennis has left since then, but Ben's certainly still part of it.
Yep.
And so since 2017, we've had a 7-person committee.
Yep.
And the same people are still on it.
Yep.
And we wanted also to try and have a mix. So we have a transgender woman on our committee. We have 2 lesbians. We have 3 gay guys and 1 bisexual guy.
Yep.
And we've divided up what we do.
Yep.
And it's been fantastic. And
so it's almost like a community within the community.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I guess the best part about it is that we've brought along so many people, particularly women, who have never felt safe enough to go to the football before.
Yep.
But they do now, and they come along with our group.
Yeah. It's interesting, your comment about, I wasn't brave enough to stand up and say something. I mean, for me, you're almost more brave now, because what we have now that we didn't have back then was the online trolls, and you're a target if someone wants to say something to you from an account that doesn't have a face. So that's fascinating, and I don't even think it's about now. This is something that will be, you've really set the groundwork for something that in 60 years they'll look back on Carlton Pride and say, this is where it all began.
Hopefully.
That's heartwarming to see.
And
I'm glad that the club have been receptive to that.
The club's been great. I think at the beginning, they were quite rightly, we're sitting back a little bit, waiting to see what sort of value that we could bring to the club, and also how we were going to run our club, if we were going to do it, our group, professionally or not. But I think they have seen that now. And they're very supportive. We're now an official Tier 1 supporter group of Carlton. And they're very supportive of us.
That's amazing. We're entering year 4.
That's
so
right.
what are I can only assume there's been drastic changes from then until now. What have you noticed, not just with membership, but what have you noticed with your experience at the footy?
Look, I think the biggest thing would be what I was mentioning before, that people are coming up to us and saying they're coming to the footy now because they feel safe, and they feel that they have a group to be with. And a lot of, initially at least, and still, a lot of people, particularly heterosexual people, will say to us, well, what's sexuality got to do with football? And we say, absolutely nothing. Sexuality is what brings us together. But the reason that we're together is that we want to create a respectful and a safe place for Carlton supporters to be together. And if those supporters happen to be from the LGBTI community, then that's a good place for them to be. But absolutely, it's got nothing to do with sexuality, other than that's what brings us together.
There's an interesting notion to that, and in the times that we live in now, I think one thing we can get better at is empathy. And just because you don't know what that I don't know what that experience is like, going to the footy and hearing a comment that I would take really personally or be fearful of. But I do have empathy with the fact that, hey, at the end of the day, you didn't feel comfortable enough to go to the footy to the point where you stopped going. And for me, that kills me, because the footy for me is that's the safe place, that's the haven. And so I think that message of, and it's great to see that people who may not necessarily be members of Carlton Pride still react in that way. I think that's a great notion. So we're seeing a difference in the way people are responding. How have you felt about? I mean, this isn't a Carlton fan issue. This is just more of a society issue. And gathering from the way I've spoken to you, it would be very easy for you to resent the world. But it's almost as if you've forgiven and you've sort of created a solution. Is that fair to say?
I guess I don't even look at it so much as forgiven, as more as, well, I have to find a way to move into this world and to show that world that there's nothing wrong with us, that we're okay, that we can be part of you too, we can get along well, we can actually help each other and have a great time together. So it's just a question of moving into the world and showing people how you can be a part of it.
Yeah.
Whereas before they perhaps wanted to separate you.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's what footy does. It's an inclusive sport.
Yeah.
By nature. You know, you have 22 players who take the field,
That's
but
right.
then you have all the staff, you know, whether it be coaches and even the people that play the little role. So that's great. So looking at 2020, and I guess, well, let's start with 2020 and then we'll look at the future.
Yep.
Tell me about what is happening or what's on the horizon with Carlton Pride, and I guess if anybody wants to get involved, what happens and what's the process?
Well, firstly, we've got a Facebook group, so it's very easy to find us, just Carlton Pride on Facebook.
Yep.
But we have a planning day, a full planning day, so we had that in early December of the committee, so we worked from about 11 in the morning till 8 at night.
Yep.
Planning everything that we're going to do this year. And we have a number of events that we follow, and first one is that we have an annual event that Carlton supports. Last year we did that, and we had 3 players who we interviewed, etc. So that was a great event, and we're hoping to build on that again this year. We also have Pride Game, which is an AFLW game against the Bulldogs. That's coming up in February.
Okay.
And we have a tent there next to the Carlton Football Club tent. So we're working together to do that. And then also we're, for the first time this year, sponsoring an AFLW player, Alison Downey.
Great. Shout out to you, Alison Downey.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to doing that, to those connections. We also have pre-game drinks before each game so that we all gather together, and we always invite the people from the other team, the LGBTI people from the other team, but anyone can come along, of course. And apart from that, we have away game drinks. So if Carlton's playing interstate, we have a pub, Norton's in Carlton, that we go to. And we
the
have
old
drinks
fraternity.
There. Yes, that's right.
It's an old staple of the Carlton Football Club.
Do you know the interesting thing about that pub? It's ironic that we have our drinks there now, because in the 1970s, that pub was known as a pub where straight people went, men, to bash gay people.
Really?
Yeah. So it's really interesting how the turn in history.
Love that.
Yeah.
What does it do for you? I mean, obviously, I know this isn't about you, and I know you know I don't want you to feel like you have to talk about yourself, but I just you should be so proud. I mean, this is a phenomenal achievement. It's you know, to be a pioneer, to be part of the group of pioneers, to really you know, plant that seed. That takes real bravery and real courage.
Well, I think the first thing I'd say there is just that. I guess I had the idea at the beginning, but certainly in terms of the building of the whole thing, that's been all of us. That's been a committee of 7 people who have done that. There's lots and lots of things there that I could never have done myself. I'm not known for my IT skills.
Well, everyone's got a strength, right?
And I think that's what we've done. We've drawn on each other's strengths, and we've got such a diverse group that the skills have really all come together very well and allowed us to build a really strong group. So it's been great that.
What do you picture Carlton Pride being in, you know, 10 years from now? What do you...
Look, I think probably one of the main things would be that most likely the committee that is in place right now won't be the committee that will be in place in 10 years' time, but that will be a success. If there is another committee, another group of people who've come along and taken on the task, then that will be a success, because I suppose longevity is what we would be hoping for, because these issues, whilst they perhaps have lessened, they haven't gone away. I mean, just last year, for example, I was at one of the matches, and it might surprise you to know I was wearing my Carlton Pride scarf, and I was abused by 3 young guys who barracked for Carlton at the ground, inside the ground. So, you know, the issues are not always going away. Sometimes they're under the surface there.
It's interesting because you can, I mean, there's the glass half full, glass half empty. I mean, we're obviously, I think, a lot further advanced than what we were 30 years ago, but there is still a long way to go. What is the key here? Like, I mean, because obviously, like you just said, it's still happening, and I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't see it online. So what's the key moving forward? Is it just continued persistence?
I think probably one of the main things is visibility. And that's what our group is. So the very fact that we wear rainbow scarves, and we've got other merchandise, on sale now.
Beautiful, yep.
It's that visibility that lets people know you're there. And actually, I'll tell you a story that happened just at the end of last year, where I was at the MCG at a match, half-time, in a group of us with all of our scarves on, and I saw a woman sort of quite a distance away, indicating to her what looked like perhaps her elderly father, and she pointed at us to show him that there was this group of people there from wearing rainbow colours, etc. And I could tell that they were really approving of it.
Yeah.
They sort of smiled, and it was, for me, it was just great, because it was recognition. We didn't even talk, didn't know them, but it was recognition that we were there, because there's an invisibility about being at the football, like I was 20 or 30 years ago, and trying not to be seen in case you might get bashed.
I think also in this day and age, and this is just something that I feel, I mean, if you're watching this and you're a crowd member, which a lot of us are at times, and you hear something like that, it's on. I mean, we can talk about changing the rules and changing the laws and, you know, fan engagement officers at the footy, but I think for something like this to change, it's going to take us. And if I ever heard that at the footy, I mean, it would take a simple, oi, pull your fucking head in, and you know what I mean? And I think that's got to be the next step. Because if you are silent, well, then you're part of the problem. You know?
And I think you make a really good point there. But the other point I'd make too, though, is that it's a lot easier for men to do that. It's a lot easier for tall men to do that, or you know, big men to do that. I'm quite small, but it's a lot harder for men, and I think it's a lot harder certainly for some women to actually do that. And that's why it is important that other people do it, because sometimes you don't feel safe enough to do it because you're not the big guy who's going to be able to stand up.
Because if something was to...
that's right.
I see what you mean.
Not that you want... You don't want conflict anyway.
Of course.
But
that's the last thing you want. And See, I'm a bit of a... If I have a problem, I'm not afraid to...
Look, I do too, actually, as a matter of fact. I do stand up for myself.
And
but I suppose I like to know I've got friends around me at the time.
Of course. Of course. I think my mouth's got me in trouble a few times anyway, so I do say that with the caveat. No, that's great. Look, I'm looking forward to having a few beers before the game this year. That's going to be fantastic.
Come along and join our pre-game drinks.
I'm down. I'm down. So let's talk about this year. What are you most excited about, whether it be Carlton Pride or just in general? Because I feel like the buzz and the electricity is just, it's there, waiting to be unlocked.
Look, I'd like to be able to truthfully say I'm, looking forward to the premiership this year, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But I really do think I guess all Carlton fans this year are looking for improvement, and we say that every year. But I think this year there's, as you say, there's a real buzz, because with the new coach, a new way of playing that we saw in the last half of last year, I think there's a renewed confidence about how they go about their game. And probably the thing that they need to really build this year is just that sense of each other and being able to play together. And of course, we have a few new players coming in, Eddie coming back, etc. They're going to have to learn how to be a team together. And that's not something that comes overnight. In fact, it is in a way a connection with Carlton Pride, in the sense that we've had to build a team. We've had to have aims, know how we're going to get there, and move along that and make sure that you're doing that. And I think that a football team has to do the same thing.
No doubt. No doubt. I do want to take your attention back to the issue, just because I had a question that came to my mind. I was watching a clip of Dale Thomas on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and he was talking about homosexuality in the league, and how do you feel about, is it one of those notions where it's only a matter of time before someone is the trailblazer, and how do you feel that they'd be accepted, or how do you feel it would go? What's your take on the issue?
Look, I think it's an interesting issue, and it's a complex issue too. And one of the things that Carlton Pride says straight away is that we are not about players coming out. That's not what we're on about. because lots of people think, again, they connect the sexuality thing and they think that, you just want players to come out so that you can feel good or whatever. But we believe that it's a very private thing to do.
Yep.
It's a very complex and difficult decision to make.
Yeah.
And for a player to do that, he's going to know that he's going to get an enormous amount of attention, media attention, not all good.
Yeah.
So what we say as Carlton Pride is not that we are looking forward particularly to a player coming out, but rather that if one ever does, we will be there to support that player.
Gotcha.
And we will be able to hopefully help with advice and help the player understand how to go about things a little bit more, and help the club to do that too.
Yeah.
Having said that, I guess that in the future a player may come out. I mean, we had Ian Roberts come out in the rugby years and years ago, and the sky didn't fall in.
Yeah.
So I suppose that that will happen.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'd sort of ask, well, is that the aim? And I think no, it's not the aim. The aim would be that a player could be gay and within a football club, and that player feels comfortable enough that everyone in the football club, who perhaps keep it a secret, but everyone in the football club accepts that and knows who he is and or she, and works with them to make them feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So I guess I see it more as a sort of an interior thing rather than exterior, because in a way, the exterior part of it, it's none of our business. It's not my business.
Yeah,
not
like
your
it
business.
just is what it is.
Yeah.
It's just, and that's the learning that I take away from, themes like this coming up. I think there's a lot of misinformation and lack of education, and I think that's the other notion as well. I've almost personally, sometimes I don't know how to talk to someone from the community because I don't know, am I going to offend you with what I'm saying or things of that nature. And I think that's the other important thing as well, especially with Carlton Pride. Any interaction I've ever had, if I've said something that might be incorrect or, you haven't sort of chastised me for it, it's just more, okay, this is how we feel about this. And I think that's important as well, because I think educating people first is one of the important steps.
But on your point there, I would say that the important point, it's not so much that you can make a mistake or you can say the wrong thing. Sure, people can say the wrong thing, but if you do, just say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realise," and get on with the conversation, sort of thing. And it's not. I don't think that it's. I don't think the LGBTI community want people to sort of tiptoe around the issue. They're more than welcome to be open about that and to ask questions about it, etc.
I think you need that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that, going back to what I was saying before. Invisibility means being silent about it. Actually, I'm doing a PhD on 1950s gay people at the moment, gay men, 1940s and 1950s. And one of the biggest issues that is coming out of that is the whole issue in that era was silent. It was just not talked about. And so these men felt like they were absolutely alone. Many of them thought they were the only homosexual in the world. And that issue is no different today, and particularly again at places like the football. And to go back to my point before, that's why we are visible, because otherwise people would say, "Oh no, there aren't any gay people sitting at the football today." Well, there are.
Well, I think that's what I picture in the future as well. In 10 years, can we have a bay that's just like a whole bay that's that's colourful? I think that'd be great. A sea of navy blue with a bay of rainbow.
There's still some way to go, because just last year, Brett, who's from Rainbow Crow Adelaide Crows group, he was at the grand final. Was it Adelaide the year before last?
With
wasn't
Richmond?
it? Yeah. And he had a rainbow flag which the Adelaide Football Club had approved in the cheer squad. But some security guys came along from MCG and singled him out, pulled him out of the crowd. There's a whole to-do about him having this rainbow flag in the crowd.
Yeah, wow. We're very, like I said to you before, conservative, and anyone pushing a new idea is initially met with a bit of resistance, and love it or hate it, that's Australia. That's absolutely. It's conservative. Yes, that's maybe why we're pretty safe and secure. But at the same time, if you really believe in something and you really believe in pushing or bringing a new idea to the table, you've got to be willing to cop absolutely. Rise above the hate, so to speak.
And it's not just about LGBTI groups either. If you think about people with disabilities, how people don't approach them, and the sort of silence that surrounds them, and their presence at the football. I mean, they have a few seats set aside, and that's about it. So we there are lots of other issues.
Well, David, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Really a learning experience for me, not only today, but over the course of the last few years. And that's really important for me individually. And hopefully this will help spread some sort of a message. And you know what? If this conversation has helped one person... ask a question that they wouldn't have asked otherwise, I think it's done a great service. Please push on and continue to do the hard work that you're doing. Shout out to yourself and the entire Carlton Pride community, and looking forward to knocking down a few bevos with you before a game.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Go the Blues.
Go Blues.